I'm going to warn you right now, if you like indicators, this video is not for you. We are talking about VPA, volume price analysis. This is going to be a great video that dives into what that's all about and then how you can start doing your own VPA in your own trading or investing on your own charts on your own time. So in front of me, I have about 4 steps listed out that'll take us through this video piece by piece so it doesn't get too confusing too fast. And this doesn't have to be very confusing, but there's a couple components that I want to cover and make sure you're getting some examples with so that you can ultimately do this on your own without the need to rely upon someone else to do VPA for you. So to start out, there's a couple things that we will need. 1, a charting platform. 2, volume on the bottom of the charting platform or the top, so a way that we can see volume per each of the candlesticks that are popping up on our charting platform. 3, the volume profile. This is something that I wanted to add as my own spin. I think is very important and a piece to volume price analysis that a lot of people don't necessarily include initially, but it's like that intermediate step, right? So going from the beginner understanding to that next level. So you want to have a volume profile. A visible range volume profile is what I'm going to use, but something that looks like that or will work the same way is all you need. And then 4, something to do VPA on. So we got to have an asset class, stocks, crypto, commodities, whatever you want to chart. We need something that we could actually chart. So I'll walk you through, give you some more information about each of those components, but that's going to set the stage. So let's dive into the first component of doing VPA, and that's going to be analyzing price action on a chart. So in front of me, I have the S&P 500 ETF SPY pulled up, and I wanted to use this to start off because I think it's a great place to start. Now, when we're looking at SPY, there's really 3 things that I want to start off with. We're going to dive into the VPA in a second, but I think the first component to your analysis needs to be just getting an understanding, getting a feel for what we're looking at in the first place, right? If we're looking at SPY, like what do I see? Well, I see, generally speaking, over this past about a year period, we have a general trend to the upside. But inside of that general trend to the upside, there were some drawdowns, right? There were even some larger drawdowns and then eventually a break out of that drawdown, right? So that just gives me a frame of mind going in. Overall, big picture on the time frame that I'm looking at, we are trending up. This is not even using volume. This is just getting an overall sense of what's actually happening and the context behind what we're charting. So we're identifying the trends. I want to identify large moves. Like recently, we had a very large move, relatively speaking, right? We had a lot of choppy action, slowly up trending, slowly down trending. Then we had a very explosive move in just a couple of weeks on SPY. That's notable. I want to keep note of that inside of this right here, or log it and jot it down so you have that to work from. I also want to note gaps. So again, before we even look at volume, we're looking at price action. And what do I see inside of this big move, right? So we have 2 things, right, to note. Big move, okay, cool. Trending to the upside, great. Third thing is going to be gaps. This is right here something that I want to pay attention to because we've got gaps on the chart. Now, do all gaps fill? No. But do a lot of gaps fill? Yes. That's what's important about gaps. We've talked about that in prior videos. We even have other videos. There's even a gaps indicator on TradingView. We've got a video on that from a while back that you can look at if you're not sure how to identify gaps. They can do it for you. But these are things that I want to note, and they will potentially play into our volume price analysis as we start to do that on our given charts. Now, before we get into the next piece, I do want to mention the platform we're using here is TradingView. We'll leave a link to this exact platform. You can sign up and even save $15 if you use a paid plan, but you don't have to use a paid platform. Now, there are components to this platform, indicators such as the volume profile, that are behind a paywall. But there are other platforms, for example, Webull, where you can chart your stocks, see charts like this. Might look a little bit different, but you can customize it. And then you can actually get the volume profile on there for free. So there are plenty of places to go. If you got any questions about that, leave them down below or check out other videos on the channel because we've got a lot of videos covering different platforms, how to use them, so you can get familiar. That should not be a humongous problem, especially if you're starting out. So the next step, what we want to do is we want to analyze volume during these key observations that we noticed in price action. So what I want to do is I want to go back in time to this area. I'm going to key in right here, right? We had a very explosive move. A lot of gaps on this chart. So what I want to then do is I want to look down at the bottom of my screen and look at volume during this time. So what I can do is I can pretty much, I'm just going to draw a box so we can make it a little bit easier. I'm going to box in this period that we're looking at where we have this very explosive move. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to notice what happened or what was volume looking like during this time. So what I notice is that generally speaking, we actually had volume sort of trending down, and we didn't have a ton of volume during this time. Volume was actually lower on average than the weeks prior and then the weeks following this really big move. Interesting. I'm going to keep note of that, put it in my back pocket. Next, I'm going to look on the right-hand side of our screen, the volume profile. So I'm going to go in and key in that exact same area, that exact same time frame, right? And if you notice on the right-hand side, watch this. When I make a drawing on the TradingView charts with the drawing tool, see how it highlights the price levels on the right? Pretty cool. So now I can really easily see. What I'm also going to notice is that towards the bottom here, not a lot of volume, right? We have these bigger areas, these volume nodes, if you will, these spikes in volume. And that's essentially all it's telling us is that we have had a lot of volume exchanged at the price over on the y-axis. That's all it's telling me, okay? So what I'm going to note is these areas, they tend to be areas of consolidation, or they tend to be areas where we either had news events or large moves or really just a lot of volume exchange at that spot, whether it was, areas we bounced off of and then rejected and then bounced and rejected. These are areas of interest, right? So the note down here, now this is taking into account this is the visible range volume profile. So what that really means is it's looking at the entire time span that I have on my chart. So if I were to zoom in, let me get rid of some of these things right here. Let me get rid of this at the bottom. If I were to zoom in and really kind of focus in and narrow in on the specific time frame that I have circled, okay, and the few months before and the few weeks after or so, this volume, this visible range volume profile is going to change. Now watch, see how it has a big volume node at the bottom? That's now gone. Where is the largest volume we've been seeing? It's actually right up here where price has been kind of consolidating the past couple of weeks. And it's right here. Price consolidated and was slow to move in here. So just a lot of volume was kind of just rolling through an exchange at that level. It also happens to be where we had a high back in here, right? So now what I note is that towards the lower end, a lot less volume, and then there's a lot more volume up in here, a lot less volume here. So what I note is that towards the top end of this big move, there's a lot of volume exchange. A lot of orders were exchanged. We had a lot of action at that spot. And again, I put that in my back pocket and I'm noting that. There's one more thing before we start to put all of this together and use some additional examples. There's one more thing that I want you to pay attention to. Make sure you're paying attention to the dates. So go down here, this day where we had very low volume, and even this period where we had very, very low volume right here. And then this period in here where there was some low volume. What do those two periods have in common? Holidays. Now, the market's not trading on the actual holidays, but around those holiday times, Thanksgiving in the first circle, and this is the Christmas New Year's time frame in the next circle, around those times, we see lower volume. Why? Because people are on vacation, people are home with family, they're not working. We don't see a lot of volume and trading activity during those times. So again, that also can be noted and put in your back pocket so you're aware, hey, those are Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. We kind of expect lower volume during those periods anyway. But the key is when we get those surges in volume and the high volume and what happens when we see higher volume. That's the key, because price action and these moves on high volume tend to have a little more conviction, if you will. And that means there's more certainty behind that move because it was done on high volume. A lot of shares, a lot of contracts, a lot of whatever was traded and pushed price through up or down a key level or whatever area on the chart. And that was done, again, with higher volume. So now that we've got the analyzing the chart down, let's do this exact situation on a chart like NVIDIA. So we're going to use VPA over the past couple of months. We'll use an example of a stock that was trending down as well. So what do we see on NVIDIA? What we see on NVIDIA, right, is a pretty nice area. If I just adjust this chart, generally a trend up. Like generally speaking, it's been trending up, okay? And inside of this trend to the upside, there's been some consolidations and some pullbacks, and there's been some bounces. But what I want to point your attention to are these volume spikes, okay, that we've seen the past couple of months on NVIDIA. And what has happened at those areas. So if I jump back in, NVIDIA testing this 500 level and then pulling back. NVIDIA pushing up towards 475, then it starts to pull back. NVIDIA pushing up towards 500 again, and then it gets there, and then it pulls back, again, on higher volume. There's actually an earnings involved there as well. Then NVIDIA pushing up and through the 500 level, guess what? On higher volume. So there's an area of interest very clearly on the chart. It's the top of this volume node. We've got a lot of volume right in this area from about 415 all the way up to 500. Again, that's because we've been trading in that area for some time. Now, every time it gets up to the top end, what happens? It has fallen off, but it's continuing to build higher lows in that period. So what we're really looking for here is NVIDIA to break an area of prior respect where we had high volume pushing up into and then it fell back off, and a reaction was made. A reaction happened with that high volume. Something happened. The key is looking at volume and seeing what has happened during when that volume was high or low, and then what has happened at that price level on the right-hand side. Is that a volume node? Is it an area of interest? And that's exactly what we have on NVIDIA. Now, volume comes in, it gets higher. We see volume increase again as of late. And guess what? We got the follow through. NVIDIA just broke through and pushed through on high volume. That's interesting. That's something to note. That means we have more conviction behind this move. And it seems to be, as the past couple of days, that NVIDIA is holding up and pushing higher as it's broken out over an area of resistance or an area that it has previously respected as a very key area of interest. Let's point your attention to a 5-minute chart on NVIDIA. This white line is the VWAP, the volume weighted average price. And what I want you to point your attention to is the areas where we see big moves. And NVIDIA has a very large move right in here. Now that happened around midday, so we don't tend to see a ton of volume there, but inside of that big move, there were some clear volume spikes to the upside in some areas where we had a lot of volume. Then what does NVIDIA do? NVIDIA pulls back into the close. Now that pullback period, what happens? We actually did not see for this entire pullback period. Okay. Now that's also, respect the last few minutes of the day, we see higher volume, but that volume at the end of the day did not eclipse the volume that we actually saw earlier in the day as NVIDIA was pushing higher. We see NVIDIA pulling back, and this chart on the top, right, looks pretty nasty. Like this pullback looks like, oh man, that's a pretty substantial move, right? NVIDIA goes all the way to 543, then pulls back to 531. That's over a $10 pullback. That does not look good. A lot of red candles. But what does the volume actually tell us? The volume tells us that this was done on low volume. It was not a high conviction move. The higher conviction, the higher volume actually occurred earlier in the day when we had a very large move to the upside. And this can be applied on any time frame, but it's like the next piece, the next layer to unpack in doing VPA, volume price analysis, where we want to be watching what happens when volume is high, what happens when volume is low. Inside of some of these bigger moves, we might find on larger time frames, and we can drill deeper in to see what's going on the shorter time frames to potentially signal what may happen going forward. What ends up happening the next day? Well, NVIDIA climbs higher. The day after that, NVIDIA actually pushes higher. So the stock has actually continued to push higher and higher and higher after this pullback, which occurred again on lower volume. Funny how that works. Here's mRNA. I'm going to get into this chart in a second, but I do want to also touch on, let's be honest, this is not 100%. I would be lying and leading you on if I told you that this is 100%. This is not 100%. And yes, this comes at the expense of views and the clickbait and the flashy factor that you're going to see. Because you watch a lot of these things on YouTube, and I think it's one of the worst parts of the trading industry. People, whether they tell you or not, they make it seem as if it must do this, it must respect this, you have to, and guess what? It does not happen all the time. But we can use this to get an edge because we've got a higher probability of one thing over the other, and that is what actual trading is all about. So here's an example of a move to the downside. What do we see, right? Big move on mRNA. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer to what we got as of late. Big move. And what we'll notice is that on this way down, we see higher spikes in volume. Very high spikes in volume we can point out. And there's even one right here that was actually a bounce up and then it fell right back off. Higher spikes in volume. But what do we have with these higher spikes in volume? We've got a trend to the downside, right? And all these higher spikes of volume are actually right around key areas or times when mRNA makes a big move up and then right back down, or a big move down. A big move down occurs around these high volume spikes. That means we've got conviction and sellers in control pushing price down. Lower volume, we see it consolidate, it bounce up a little bit on lower volume. And then what happens? We get the continuation and the confirmation underneath a key level on the volume profile, a very nice volume node saying, hey, a lot of price has exchanged at this level. It's an area of consolidation. If we break below that, price may move quickly to the downside because not a lot of price has been exchanged down in here. And what happens? Not only do we break to the downside, but we do it on high volume and we get a very big move on mRNA to the downside. I used this to take a trade on mRNA back in October, and I did very, very well, but I used VPA to do that. And I'm not here to tell you, look at me, I'm the most successful person, I do this all the time, it's the no lose, always win strategy. No, because it doesn't work all the time. But when it does work, you can get very large gains, very large winners. And if you're quick to cut your losers and you manage risk properly, we got other videos about managing risk, and actually one that's already out or is coming out very, very soon that simplifies managing risk down tremendously. And if you follow that approach, you can use this to complement a trading strategy and actually do quite well. So the biggest takeaways. The beginning was analyze the charts, trends, understand what we got going on, look at volume. Where is volume high? Where is volume low? What's happening during those times? What's happening at key areas on the volume profile? Where are the volume nodes? Where are the large spikes sticking out on the chart? Where are the gaps? Where are the large areas where we don't have a lot of volume on the volume profile? And if price starts to move into one of those areas, whether up or down into those areas, we could see an acceleration of price to fill through that gap as price tends to move faster through volume gaps. Again, tends is the key word, not all the time. That right there will put you in a really good spot mentally to attack and approach volume price analysis. This video hopefully was helpful. If it was, consider leaving a like, subscribing, maybe even sharing the video with someone else who could benefit. I appreciate you guys so much. Again, we'll leave links and resources down below to TradingView for $15 off. We use that in this video and a lot more where that came from. Check those out if interested. It supports the channel, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.